Humans of Earth, welcome to Will AI Snap That. I am your host, Michael Rollins, and I am joined by my co-host, Thanos, he of the Snapdom. And we are here to help you navigate your life under your new robotic overlords. Thanos, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. And for those of us joining us on YouTube, I have a new background, which is sort of
I
real, sort
know.
of not.
And no, there's like a real good meta aspect on that. I really like it. It's it's got a it's got a very meta aspect to it,
If,
I
if you're
think.
not watching this on YouTube, it's my real background, but it's in a cartoon version from ChatGPT.
Yeah, it looks like if the designers from Simpsons were to build your background. Like that's exactly what it looks like.
ChatGPT now refuses to build my image on the likeness of The Simpsons. It did that when they first came out with the 4.0 image generation, but no more. So I have some. I
But
still have 3 or 4 Simpsons images that I'm hanging on
okay,
to.
yeah, because the whole we're stealing all of this information, et cetera, and yeah, um, they're trying to limit their legal exposure right now. Um,
You can go on Elon's. Have you been on Elon's on Grok?
Man, I
It
have
has
not.
no
I have.
filters. It has I don't know what it's called. Can we swear, by the way, in this podcast, or do we have to bleep these things out
And
later?
yeah,
It has a
we can.
batshit crazy mode. It's called like off the handle mode, and has a conspiracy mode, and you can just talk to it, and it will just go off, and it is incredible. And do not do when your kids are around.
Yeah. No, it
So I,
all of my experiences revolving around Elon Musk have just been bad. And I've had some that were perhaps a little too personal. And so I try to just not do anything with that guy at all. The true story, I was invited to join to put my resume in for Doge,
well,
which
that
I
could have been
did,
fun.
which I did just to see what would happen. I never got the call. I was never going to take the job, but I was like, oh, what if this guy wants to hire me? What would it even look like? And then a friend of mine did put his resume in and he did get the call. And he turned them down flatly because they wanted him to, it was like 185,000 a year. You had to live in DC. You had to be in the office 7 days a week, and the job was going to go on for at least 18 months.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with like
And
no all around on that one.
yeah, this is a negative. And then, so what did they end up doing? They hired a bunch of, 19, 20-year-old kids that are just angry.
Yeah,
There you
I've
go.
seen
Big
this in
ball.
the news. This is gonna be fun.
Oh, yeah. All right. So, anyways, Thanos, I have one of the greatest announcements to make ever, which is that the Claude Pro Max subscription now includes Claude Code. And that means that for $100 a month, I can basically get all of my Claude Code writing done. But last month, I know we talked about this, I spent over $250 on Claude Code API calls. And I was just like, shit, I can't afford this right now. It's like, damn.
I added mine
Um,
up. My April spending was somewhere in the 200 vicinity.
yeah. I mean, and that's, I mean, it was really heavy use, but I am 100% certain that there's some kind of surge pricing packed in because every time it feels like it's snappy and it's fast, the costs are just lower. But when it starts to get slow, it seems almost unrelated. Like, obviously, if the context window gets full, it will get slow. But, like, I'll start something, there's context window is relatively empty, and all of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, this was $15. So it was, I am happy. I am very happy. And so is my pocketbook.
Since this is an AI
So,
podcast, I should say I did notice a few things in that vicinity. I switched over. So I've been on Klein for the past couple of weeks,
right.
and in researching this, it turns out there's a Klein fork called Roo, ROO, and that seems to be getting more development than Klein. It has some really cool features. And
Yep.
one of the things one of the really cool options that I saw in Roo that I haven't dared take on is it has some experimental like boost mode, and what it does is it insists more that your prompts are taken into consideration at the side effect of
Okay.
cost. But the other thing that I noticed with Roo is that it seems a lot faster than Klein. And now that has me wondering, like, isn't the speed having to do with the underlying model, or is it somehow how they use it? And could the actual tool you're using have an impact on the speed? So I'm playing around with that. And the one thing that Rue does that I wasn't sure if I'm not sure if Klein did it, but like for everything that it does, it gives you like the breakdown cost, not just the add-on. So you can
Hmm.
kind of see like what was the really expensive operations here. I use an
Hmm.
MCP server called Context 7. I think I mentioned this in the last
Yeah,
episode.
you mentioned it. I went and checked it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool, but like when you pull that thing in, that brings in a lot of stuff, and the next thing is really going to cost you. So I started being a little
Right.
bit more cost conscious in, splitting my files. Like, do I have a really big file that I'm working with? And
I've
do
noticed
I
that.
really
Yeah.
want to do that? Because like it's just good practice not to do that. But now it's really
Hmm.
good practice enforced by the fact that every time you ask it, like it does a change, and you say this wasn't quite
Hmm.
right, do it again, then it has to like process the whole damn thing again and again and again. So if you had like 1,000 line file, that begins to add up. Whereas now if you make it like a 200 line file, that both goes faster and cheaper. So it's kind of going to enforce some of the stuff that we ought to be doing anyway.
Yeah, and I think that actually brings us into our topic for today nicely. And our topic for today is your wheelhouse, which is things like how development and engineering teams operate efficiently and swiftly and with high velocity. It's definitely a place where I've learned a whole lot from you. I've mentioned it before. You and I kind of are on the opposite spectrums of how we organize our lives and thinking, right? You're incredibly structured and organized, and I'm kind of vibe code the whole way down, right? So, we had left last week and we started talking about teams and how AI will impact teams. And you finally were like, "We're 45 minutes in. Let's stop it right here." And so let's talk about that today because this is your wheelhouse. Tell me about like how do you think AI is going to impact teams and how should they think about it? This is an example. It's
Well,
like,
AI or no AI, you need three things, right? You need a
okay,
really solid uh, Jira setup with really strong workflows. You need a
okay,
very strong set of specifications and a really big QA team. No,
for AI.
no, just messing with you.
I was like, wait, I'm out. Fuck it, I'm a vibe code.
I want to see how long it would take for you to like ask,
You
what the
said
hell
a
are you on?
really Jiro with workflows, and I'm like going, I, it, I, all right, I'm just gonna let you roll.
All
Talk to
right,
me.
more seriously, more
Talk
seriously.
to me
No,
good.
don't do any of these three things. Actually, like most of the times, don't do any of these three things. Sometimes you could do some of them. But the way that I think about engineering is I think of like this kind of an inner wheel that is the software aspect of this, and then there's an outer wheel that is the product aspect of this. And the inner wheel is you have some idea and you give it to engineering, and then out it comes the other side into production. But that's kind of like not necessarily having any product market fit. That's just having the ability of shipping things quickly, and you got to get that wheel to function quickly. Otherwise, if it takes you like a month to spit something out, then you can't really do anything with the outer wheel. And the outer wheel is the product market fit, is the experiments that you do, which is you have a hypothesis that this should work, and let's face it, a lot of the things that we think are features are actually feature hypotheses because we don't really know. Yeah, we think the user are going to like that, but like until we
Yeah.
put it out in production and try it out, no one really knows. I think we often fall in that trap of not having that humility to admit that, and that gets us into trouble. So I like to have a fast adder wheel where I can say I have product hypothesis, I can put it
Mhm.
in and then get it all the way out to the customer, learn from it, and then try it again and again and again.
Yeah.
And you can see like the inner wheel could have some stuff related to AI coding, like right in the middle. So if you can spit out code faster, you can get the inner wheel to function faster. But there's other things that happen in there, right? There's this testing and there's deploying and figuring things out. And if you have a big team, there's a lot more activities that happen. And the outer wheel has a lot more stuff going on because you have to maybe talk to the customers and talk to the product and get internal alignment for things. So for the things that really matter, you have to nail all these things inside and out. And if you skip something, you're going to end up with one bottleneck somewhere that's going to be controlling your whole speed, and you're not going to be able to get the output that you want. And AI, the interesting part is like it really helps with like really helps. A lot of stuff that we've been talking about is really focused on the inner part. Like, can I write code faster? But
Mhm.
that doesn't necessarily translate to can I get that code in production faster? Can I then get the agreements that I need to alter this code and alter the features and get things that drive my business faster at the end of the day. That was a lot. So maybe we start from the middle and
Well,
start sort of picking that apart.
actually, I want to start with the idea of a product hypothesis, um, because I like that, and or a feature hypothesis. One of the things that it is a real struggle there's a trap that it's easy to fall into is at the beginning of the process you assume you know what the user wants and what the user is going to do, and you are often wrong, and the faster that you get to the realization that you're wrong, the better. And it's really honestly going all the way back to the days of waterfall development where you would have one release a year or two releases a year. It was The idea was based on this idea that there's a tastemaker somewhere here in the back end product. They know exactly what the users are going to want, and if they don't want that, they're holding it wrong, a la Steve Jobs. you know and
I
so
was more thinking of
as
Don Norman's teapot, the one that had you've seen the interaction design book by Don Norman has a teapot and it has the handle and the spout on the same side. So you're holding it wrong.
that's no good. But so, anyways, long story short, it is really easy to get into that trap. And so, the idea of a feature hypothesis, I really like. And so talk me through the flow again. You've got the internal development, but where does the hypothesis for the feature come from? Is that external to this whole thing initially?
I think for me that's the outer side of the outer wheel. So it's internal to your process at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has to come up with a feature hypothesis. And there's interesting things, right? The same way that we build a piece of code and we figure out what's the most complicated part and we de-risk it by doing it first. The same way when
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking about your business, you might want to think about which are the feature hypotheses that are the most risky, the ones that I really want to prove out, and figure those out first. Again, there may be times where you want to, if there's a base that you know you can stand on, you might want to build that one first and then build your hypothesis because you can maybe have some demoable things. But in general, if you have risks, sometimes it's more useful to go figure that one out. So I would really want to position this as a product hypothesis so we all know we're trying this out. And that has some impacts right down the road. I'm not saying this willy nilly because if you consider this is fixed and it's going to be done, you might go and over engineer it. Whereas if you accept that you may um, be throwing this away if it doesn't work,
Mm-hmm.
then you may build it in a slightly different way. And Rob Zuber from Circle CI said this once a while, and it stuck with me. He says, like, if you have it built just right, you're happy to keep it and ship it or throw it away. Maybe paraphrasing it, so
Mm-hmm.
blame me for the
Yeah.
bad aspects of this, but it's not really cool in the way that you build your product in a way that you can develop it and build on it if you really want to, if you want
Mm-hmm.
to keep it, but also you wouldn't be sad if you learned from it, throw it away, and start over. And the idea of failing fast, by the way, is not because you want to fail, but if you are down a rabbit
Right.
hole, then you can fail and then do something else.
Yeah. It's funny because I always tend to slot into true believer, right? What we're building is amazing. We are building the best thing ever. And I have found that it is very difficult for me, but very productive when I sit back and ask myself, are we just building a bunch of crap that nobody wants? you know? And the thing that pops to mind for me, and really honestly, this is a question I ask myself often right now. Everybody tells you they want you to build a dashboard, but nobody really wants a dashboard because what they want are the decisions that can come out of the dashboard after. And so what ends up happening is you build the dashboard and everybody looks at it, they get really excited, and then they close the browser window and they may come back a month later because the dashboard doesn't have a lot of new information until then.
It's
And
the
what they
same
would
thing with
really
observability, right? You don't want a dashboard, you want
yeah.
alerts. Like just tell me when
Yeah.
it's when it's blown up, or tell me
Yeah,
what to do
no,
next,
and
right?
so when we were at Outlier, that was the entire idea. Like we were explicitly we were told by Sean that we would be fired if we said we were going to build a dashboard. Sean was like, to the point where he was like, we do not utter that word within our Slack. Okay. And so, but we didn't build dashboard. What we did instead was we built this system that would look through data and would surface insights that were there that people may not have known were there. And that turned out to be a product that people did like. The pandemic was a little tough on us, but so all right, let's say how does AI slot into this, right? How do you see AI fitting into this entire process?
The way that I've used it recently is when I start figuring out a feature, is you go and talk to AI about it. And it makes a really good sparring partner. And they're like it's your rubber ducky. You can go talk to it every time you want. And it's really freaking thorough. It's like annoyingly thorough some
Mm-hmm.
days, but it can guide you through things you hadn't thought about. And it's really good in sort of being um, very detailed.
Mm-hmm.
So I've said, hey, I'm going to build this. Here's a little bit of context. And it just has me talking, right? And I go through and list what I'm going to do. I actually have a new feature coming out for one of my clients, and I sat down last night and I don't type anymore. You just dictate it to Super Whisper and you kind of build what you're going to do. And as you go through it, you kind of think of a bunch of things, right? As you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
putting it on paper, as opposed to just, hey, we're just going to start coding this. Then you feed it to the AI and says, I'm building this. I kind of want to think through, tell me what other things I'm missing here. And it will build you a good list. Then you can tell it, like, ignore this. I'm interested about this. I want that. You can build you like specs. It can build you like interaction diagrams. It can build you some really nice things that just spur your thinking. And then you can
Mm-hmm.
use those to start the development when you're ready to do that. So that's the first part that I've used just to get the ball rolling of what is this that I'm building. It will sometimes go through the features and give you ideas that you hadn't thought about. Oh, the user's going to want to do this. Oh, yeah, that's probably true. I hadn't thought of that. Or hey, what
Mm-hmm.
happens in this use case? And you need to build these things out. And you go, oh yeah, probably want to de-risk that and build these things first, but maybe I can want to leave those out for later. If I'm handing the
Mm-hmm.
spec to someone else, that's sort of really nice because they will probably have the same questions the AI had. So when I put this with someone else, when I've discussed this with my AI, probably a lot of these questions come answered. When I throw the spec over the wall, if I have to someone else, there's going to be fewer questions that will come back to me of what do you mean here? If you really think
Right.
that through. By the way, don't throw specs over the wall. There's a whole thing of collaboration that we can talk about the next part.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's how I usually start. There's probably lots of room for improvement in this area. Um, like the same way that we do software development and we have different phases in I might start with like writing a code or writing a test and writing the code, then writing the linter. There may be more things that we do with specs to clear those things out and maybe get better terminology as to what we mean by
Mm-hmm.
specs. But that will get you a pretty decent starting spot.
Okay. It's interesting because we spend a lot of time talking about how AI is going to impact the jobs of engineers because we're both engineers, right? But there's another aspect that you're starting to hit on, which is how is this going to affect product managers? What is a products person job? What is a because you're talking about this interesting amalgamation where you go to the AI with I have this idea. I think this is a good feature. Now you're focusing on the technical implementation of it. But this thing's like straw manning the like or the steel was it steel manning the actual parts of the feature and telling you, oh, well, maybe users want this or maybe users want that, and you can provide that this way. I hadn't thought of that as a thing,
It,
really.
I think the cool thing is going to be when it gets clever enough that it can then generate some UI there's going to be
Hmm.
throwaway um, for the product person to
Right.
see it, play with it, feel it, and then
Hmm.
change it before it even hits engineering. Now,
Well, that's where like Lovable and a lot of those other sites come in.
yeah, I think that's truly though vibe coding, right?
It is.
That is truly the I don't care how it works because it's going to be like three screens and they're not going to really do anything. And you can
Yeah.
probably get that far enough to do certain things, but I think where you get tempted, and I'm not familiar with Lovable, but if you're hey now ship this, yeah, that's where it gets pretty sketchy.
A lot of, yes, I have definitely heard stories about people shipping off of stuff like Lovable and whatnot, and they never realized that their, AWS keys are in the clear, and they wake up to a $40,000 AWS bill. Like this actually happened to someone.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the
So,
craziest thing. That actually lines up with some of my experiences of building some greenfield
Yeah.
projects. You need to do a lot to establish where the rail tracks go
Hmm.
before you let the thing do anything. And it's easy to get from like 0 to 1, but then you need to spend like a fair amount of time getting from 1 to 2 before you can like do the really fast stuff to get from 3 to 10.
Hmm. All right, so that gives us the initial stages here, the some of the planning and architecture discussions and stuff like that. What's next?
You have me go on a tangent thought here for a second, which is, are we going to get like a lot of calls in 6 months or a year of people that want to get saved from like, hey, all our code is like 200,000 lines generated by the AI, and we have like thousands of customers on it, but we can't build anything on it because it's a mess?
I I think that's going to be a thing. Yeah,
Or
yeah.
is the AI
I
going to
like
go in and clean it up? I don't know.
it. Really, though. It's interesting you talk about that because here's there's going to be a tipping point, right? And we already kind of intuitively know it's there. But here's the tipping point. How fast is the context window going to expand? And how expensive is it going to be to keep the context window full?
It's not only that
And
though,
what
because if you have a big context window, it's pretty clear that the shit near the beginning of the window is forgotten.
is better? Yeah.
Beginning
But
end,
the
like
reason,
the old stuff tends to get more forgotten. So again, it's
yeah,
I don't want to bet against the evolution of AI getting better. It's a
right.
hard bet to make. Like I don't want to underestimate the smart people that work on this, but something will have to change there where you can put the AI without a lot of human curation to a large existing code base, and they can actually figure out what the hell's going on.
I actually responded to a comment on one of my Instagram posts today, and one of the things I've said, and I said it actually in the last episode, is like we have access to the fastest mediocre engineer in existence. And that's going to be Claude or ChatGPT, the latest models, right? The previous models, we had access to the fastest, really kind of bad engineer in existence, right? And so, at what point do these things get good enough where they can be unsupervised? Is that
So
a generation away? Is it two
it's
generations
it's
away?
weird though because it's hard to say this is the most mediocre engineer or a junior engineer because it exhibits features that exist in a very junior engineer and a very senior engineer, and it has the best parts of the
Right.
junior engineer and the worst parts of the junior engineer,
Yeah.
and the best parts of the senior engineer and the worst parts of the senior engineer, and it's all in one thing that we tend to anthropomorphize as one thing. So it's really
You saw this.
bizarre to figure out how to guide
Mhm.
this one thing to do what is productive. So like one thing that I found to be super good at is hooking things together. Because it can go read like what the function signatures are of a bunch of things faster than I can, and then
Mhm.
grab them from the right
Yeah.
places, and I don't have to spend all this time navigating to files that,
Yeah.
okay, what is this? What parameters does this exist? Okay, put this in this window, put that in that window. Now let's wire these things together. It can do this in like a flash.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
when it comes to architecture, it is terribly dumb. It has some good ideas. If you ask it the right question, it's going to answer it. But when you generally say, do this, if you kind of like just accept what it says for more than 2 or 3 times in a row, you're going off on a tangent. It is not going to be a good result. So part of my workflow is now beginning to be like, okay, I want to be able to say go off, but like after the every time I click accept, and it still hasn't solved
Mhm.
it, like it's like a half the chances now. The chances every time half that it's actually going to complete it, and then I
Oh
want
yeah.
to restore back, figure out what's going on
Yeah.
myself, give it some guidance, and go back there.
Once it starts a failure state where you realize it's not going to do the thing you want, it literally just compounds every step after that.
Yeah,
Um,
and so I had this thing yesterday where it
mhm.
built some tests and they weren't working. So I'm like, hey, Dumbo, like, hey, valuable coding partner. I don't shoot me at the end. Um, you built like 20 unit tests and you have problems with a pattern. So how about we remove all of them, figure out how to make one work, and then copy that pattern to the rest of this? Oh, great idea, right? So it does that, figures out the pattern, and then copies all the 20 in. I'm like, all right, maybe now you know how to figure this out. So I said, okay, now try it. And it said, it ran the unit test, like most failed. It made a fix, fixed one, and it kept doing this and said, I'm seeing progress, I'm seeing progress. And I was like, all right, you run. And it was actually giving me feedback that I'm seeing progress, which was kind of reassuring. And it seemed to be progressing further and further. And no, that was good. It actually went for like 5 or 10
Okay.
times with
Well.
I'm seeing progress and actually fixing stuff. And
Okay.
then it went off on a tangent, and then it got stuck and couldn't figure it out. So I had to like unwind it and go fix it myself. So it's
Yeah.
just fascinating how there's just many workflows in there are evolving.
Mhm. Yeah. I want to point out that the beauty of that statement is that it's rather pithy, and pithiness requires gross generalizations most of the time. So, um, okay, so I don't know, what were we talking about? Where were we? We were talking about you mentioned, okay, we've come up with this plan. You've tossed it over to the product people. Everybody says, okay, let's try to build this. What comes next?
Yeah, so I think before we even hit the AI stuff, I think we get into just good practices
Hmm.
in general, like how your team's structured. This is like just good engineering in general. That's a lot of what my practice as a coach is that deals with sorting out, are you thinking about engineering right, and what the different bits and pieces are in that. For me, very quickly, you have four things that I try to get everyone to go through. One is iterations. Can you get code out in production at some reasonable
Right.
pace? And there's a bunch of
Right.
structures that you need to have in place to make that happen. And we can talk about what the AI can do in these areas. This is kind of like interlude stuff, right? We've like now assume we
Right.
have some kind of spec and we want to roll forward with it. So one is iterations, two is quality, right? Whatever we can iterate fast, but can we do it with some quality? Those two kind of go closely together. Don't imagine you're going to be make the fastest possible iterations before you even touch quality. You can probably make some iterations, fix quality, and you might have to go a little back and forth between these things. But like, just think about it like, can I push stuff in production? Can I make sure that stuff is good? And then when I can do this at a reasonable pace, now that tends to get more complicated. So now it's, can I keep complexity low and manageable, and can I make sure that like my architecture doesn't get too complicated, my processes, my code, my modules, my features. This is not just features of the this is not just technical, but it's also product. Like, does my product have like 8 different features and they all interact with each other, so every time I want to make one, I can break another one. So we got iterations, we got quality, and now we can manage complexity. And now as a team, the fourth step is planning and predictability. It's people, I mean, people often start with this one and it's like, hey, I have my year plan or my 5 year plan. Heavens. It's like, dude, you can't like get one sprint done in time. You don't worry about the 5 year plan. But once you can string some sprints together and you have nailed parts one, two, and three, then you can start thinking about, how do I make these group together? How do I get more predictability in my systems, and how do I can promise things that I can deliver? So that's kind of like my big picture model. If we sort of roll it back a little bit and talk about, okay, how do we take like some of these AI tools that we've been using and just start the very basic things of how do we get code in production? Um, that has some interesting things, and I don't know. I think you probably have been playing with similar things recently,
Yeah.
but you start off with a feature. We had a discussion with the AI. It wrote a file and said this is kind of what
Hmm.
we're building. One of the things that
Yeah.
I found super helpful, and I got this from my buddy Colin and some of the documentation from Klein, is to
Hmm.
actually put a specific set of folders in your project, in your repo, and
Hmm.
for some project you're working on, you have like an active context file. So now it's like,
Right.
hey, I take the project specification, stick it in the active context file, and
Hmm.
says we're going to work on this. And the baseline instructions for the AI are, you always need to consult the active context file. If I haven't given you one, ask me for one, and do not proceed any further before you know what's happening, right? So it's going to read at
What you
least some
want?
new information before you go.
Yeah.
And that not includes only the active context file, but also I have some broad-based product specifications, some base technical and architectural specifications. So it has a general idea of what the project is and knows what the hell's going on in
Hmm.
general. Um, so now what happens is then pretty useful. Sorry, it's pretty interesting, and I haven't figured out how to make it super useful. So that's kind of part of my exploration over the coming weeks. Is when you start building, it tends to have its own kind of way of figuring out what it's going to build. So sometimes it might like ask you questions and build like one little big thing at a time. Sometimes it might just dump you like 10 files and say, hey, I'm done.
Hmm.
And none of that I found to be super useful. Like in my ideal world, I wanted to build something that I can observe, like I can run it on the browser or the app or whatever I'm building and see it.
Hmm.
So I have to be very specific in saying we're going to build this in little tiny chunks, and I want to be able to see each chunk working.
Hmm.
And the other thing I was trying to add instructions to be explicit about is there's 3 things that you have to do with each little chunk that you build before you move on to the next chunk. And if you don't, we're not going anywhere. One is has to pass the linter. Like if your code does not pass the linter, do not move forward. Like this is like basic stuff. Like if you can't lint,
Do we need to bring
don't even
the
show it
do
to
we
me.
need to bring the holy roller linter back in? Is that like brothers and sisters? There's sin within the
No.
code.
Yeah. So no pass linter. Don't even. Um,
Mhm.
this is a bit. The next one is a bit language dependent, but like I'm doing TypeScript recently, so like TypeScript compile it, and if it doesn't compile, also do not move further. Like I do want to see TypeScript errors. I don't want to see warnings. Like go sort this shit out before you even
Yeah.
like bring it to me. And
And
then
here's the
once,
thing. Like, here's the thing. It has never been easier
yeah,
to take care of these things with AI.
yeah,
Like,
it is
anyway,
mind
go on.
boggling. But you know, let me get back to this in a second. To you the third thing. So the third thing is tests. You're gonna run the unit tests on whatever you wrote, and if they don't pass, like stop here.
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out, and this is kind of like where I've been playing with it recently, is what is a good pattern? And just spoiler alert, I don't have it yet. But like there is some good pattern here of build me a little thing, run all these three things. When they pass, let's look at it, and then I'll give you further directions from there of what
Mhm.
the next thing is going to be. That seems to be like a nice little workflow. Okay, like do this chunk. Now we got this. Now do the next chunk. Now we got it. Now do the next chunk. I found that it stumbles early on in a greenfield project with establishing what the right patterns are going to be. So I was doing
Mhm.
testing, and it really had trouble like figuring out some patterns of how it's going to mock things and how it's going to put things from A to B. And very quickly it went off on a tangent. And I'm not an expert in that specific piece of um, toolchain. So it was hard for me to guide it. I had to, pause, like get used to like this is going to be a lot slower than it was for the past 10 minutes. But figuring out, oh, this is the right way of doing it and guiding it. And same thing with the example I gave earlier. Sometimes it's like, here's 10 tests. No, 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 dude, like get one test to work. We'll worry about the other
Yeah.
nine when you get the pattern down.
Yeah. What was the tool you were working with? You said you're not real good with it yet. What was that?
Oh, I'm using this project that I'm building a greenfield project, and it's a TypeScript project. It's using React on
Okay.
Next.js with Tailwind, and
Okay.
I just if I had to configure a React unit test based off of Jest by hand, that would take me a while. It's not my bread and butter.
Mhm.
Like I've built a project that had it set up, so you just go write your tests. But I have
Right.
okay, what is the right Babel configuration to you know
Mhm.
do stuff? That's not my.
Yeah. So that's well. Let me say this. That's for a greenfield project, right? You're starting. You've got open. You can do whatever the hell you want. You have the freedom to just set it to be the way you want from the beginning. As long as you provide all this extra structure at the beginning, you're good to go. What about something that's not greenfield, which is what the majority of the code that you and I work on is? It's not greenfield. How do you take an existing code base and make it, I don't know, AI appropriate? That's like
Yeah, so
what are your thoughts on that?
that's easier in some ways and trickier in other ways. So
Mhm.
I've got one existing project that comes to mind I can talk about that is not greenfield. It's not a mess exactly, but
Yeah.
it's 12 or what is it? It's 13 years old. So
Okay.
it started with when Django was in like 1.1, and
I know what you're talking about.
yes, you do. So it has good structure overall, but it has a lot of bad patterns in it. It doesn't fully pass linting. It doesn't fully pass Python code checks. Some of
Mhm.
the patterns are inconsistent because we experimented with a few different front end testing patterns and it's all over the place. So when you
Right.
go add a feature to it, it's relatively straightforward. Like it has a lot of stuff to work with. It's able to go and look in your fairly tidy architectural code
Mhm.
base and pull things as patterns of how you do this is GraphQL, so it knows how to do the mutations and queries and all that. So it ends up spitting out code that looks reasonably similar to what you have. Um,
Mhm.
and it's pretty good. Now, again, you need to do all the usual stuff of like guiding it and the techniques that I was describing earlier of having these context files and applying them and describing them and adding them over time work really well. One neat trick, by the way, that I was using is after finishing a session and before I clear the context, I asked the AI to update what it did in the context file. That was
Yeah.
that's the relatively obvious part, but the part that sparked an idea in my head a few days ago, and I started doing it is put anything that you learned from our interactions, put it also in the context file. So then it went, oh, I noticed, I was running
Mhm.
this, and you're always correcting me to run that. So let me note that the right way to
Mhm.
run the linter is this. And now he knows how to run the
Interesting.
linter. So now the intern is getting a bit more of a memory bank and learning how to be a good intern. So I don't have to tell it every time I clear the damn context.
Mhm.
So that was kind of nice. But winding back the thread, um, it is a bit trickier when you have a legacy
Mhm.
project because you will get the AI will look at some of the bad patterns. So, for
Mhm.
example, we have some types in Python that are using the optional keyword, and that is a couple of Python versions ago. That's no longer a thing, right? It's like or none. But the AI will
Mhm.
constantly just keep bringing this up, even if I put this in instructions that this is not the right way to do this. The right way to do this is this. It has so much other code that is competing for its attention that I think it sees that and just replicates it. So to get the code base ready for that, what we're doing is cleaning that mess up. So we're going back and saying, okay, now it has to actually pass linter. Now it actually has to pass type compiler, and
Mhm.
going like one module at a time and cleaning this up. And the hope is that by the time we get done with that, then now it's not gonna be a greenfield code base, but it's gonna be a much neater code base with some of the patterns that the AI is getting inspired on.
What how do you think we touched on it earlier, but you and I also have both worked on projects where you open up one of the main controllers or something and all of a sudden you realize that thing's like 3500 lines long. And you're just sitting there and you're like I need, like, I can't even find anything in this even with advanced search, right? What do you think about, like, it's not good for humans and it's doubly not good for AIs because it just blows the context window up. How do you think through breaking up breaking up files into
Funny you
smaller
should ask that because
chunks?
I actually did this recently, and I don't think I even
Hmm.
told you. So it's not like you're not
Uh-huh.
throwing me a softball question
It's
here.
not a plant. It's in the
Um,
softball.
so I had one of these files, and it was a couple thousand lines long, and it had a
Hmm.
bunch of functions, um, and I couldn't figure out like how do I methodically move this. Now I don't
Hmm.
really like when you have a function extraction, for example. That is a fairly well understood refactoring that a lot of the tools have built-in support for. So it can go
Okay.
grab everything. It knows what the local variables are. It knows what the externally fed parameters are, like from further up or further down in your local um, context. So you can do it without the uncertainty of the AI and for no
Okay.
cost, basically. So I
Yeah.
don't like doing these extractions by AI because it can mess it up, whereas the programmatic one is like bulletproof. But like finding them is a bit more interesting. So one of the things that I did is like, hey, I have this file. Now build me a diagram and show me the connections between all the functions.
Interesting.
And it did it. And now you can kind of see the patterns in the grouping. So I says, okay, now I see this function over here. That's the only thing in this clump that is connected over there. That we need to cut this out. So I said, okay,
Hmm.
like I have this. I go look at it and say, now refactor me this to get that connection out. Now I got a
Right.
nice little clump. Now I said take functions this, and this, and pop them in a different file.
Uh-huh.
Or I could do that through a refactoring, like with a tool.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was a really good analysis partner because it can go through and understand it a lot better than I could, a lot faster than I could. In the
Hmm.
past, I draw these things by hand when it's complicated. And you
Hmm.
can do this in small steps where you can update the unit test as you go, and you can have higher certainty that this thing working when you put it out in production.
Hmm.
So that was a nice technique, and I think it worked really well. Like the visualization was really great. What's the there's a kind of markdown. I want to say dolphin or
Oh, I have no idea.
pangolin or some animal that does the it's a little language, and you can put it on a website, and it builds you like a nice little chart.
Okay. Um, yeah, the name escapes me right now, but I think I know what you're talking about.
So that was a neat little trick to work with an existing code base, and
Hmm.
there's some really nice analysis. And if you send it over to look at a really big code base, you'll pay like $1 or $2, but that's going to save me like an hour or two,
Hmm.
so it's well worth it.
So it sounds like what you're doing is you're spending a lot of time looking at these directed graphs and sectioning off components into their own individual pieces. And it sounds like you're doing that not only with, like, breaking up an individual file that's too large, but also with, like you were talking about, with the type checking and making sure the linter passes and doing small portions of the code first and building your way back up. Does that sound accurate?
That sounds accurate. I think that's hierarchies is one of the ways that humans have to take big complex things and stick them in our limited lizard brains. So I find reaching for that technique very frequently because you look at the 1,000 line file and I'm like, I don't even know where to start. Like, what the hell am I going to do with that? Right? But once you
Mhm.
break it, now you can see, oh, that became like five 200 line files, and they have names that I can understand. And maybe
Right.
like I put it in a file that was called utils, and then when I was done, it's like, no, 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 this is
Mhm.
not utils. This actually does this specific feature.
Right.
By the way, that's the
Uh-huh.
secret linter thing. Find how many things are called utils in a code base. That's a
Oh,
smell.
okay. Hold on. Time out. One thing that AI is already better at than I ever will be is naming
Naming
things.
things. Yep, it is pretty good at that.
Bar foo. What am I going to name this
Yeah.
damn thing? I'll
Uh,
refactor it. Never did.
yeah, no, it's really good for asking that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So going back, yeah, so you can then organize things, and that's just a good practice altogether because it can keep it in your head, but I think also these hierarchies keep it in the AI's head a lot better.
Yeah.
So it's interesting,
Okay.
like how the similarities, right? In the way that our brain is limited in many ways, um, but we may in some ways have better memory than AI, right? Because we can figure out what's important and what's not, and remember the important things and forget the unimportant things. But the AI doesn't really have any good way of telling that, or the AI, the LLMs.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, like AI, and it basically has the memory of a goldfish. Like the AI's context window is the size of a goldfish. So unless it writes it down, it doesn't remember anything. Okay, I do want to tell you, we're getting close to, we've been at this for a while, so I do want to actually get to something that a mistake I made. Okay, and it's not necessarily a mistake, but it is oh my God, we got this brand new tool. It's amazing. Let's just AI everything. And I did it on the project for Engine Room, the CSV import. And I said, you know what? I'm going to let coding agents do this. And you know what? There were probably better ways to do it. And what I realized was eventually, I can do this for cheaper and actually faster if I let AI write the code based on a specific file format, as opposed to letting prior to execution, as opposed to letting the AI figure it out at the time of execution. And it was one of those things where I was, because of the way I built it, it actually has more capabilities than CSV import. It can do images, and it can do just straight text files. Like you can hand it a paragraph and it can extract information out of it. But the thing is like we mainly need it for CSV imports, and the it just made like I got too AI crazy. So how do you address that in a team? Because it's the brand new shiny thing. Everybody wants to write Go until they want to do AI. Like what's going on here?
Don't solve with AI what you can solve with the regex.
Hey, but we both know that AI can't do regexes either. I've seen it.
No, but the AI can generate regex,
Yes, it can,
right? So
but
so it's
it's
figure out what
wrong
the AI
half
is
the time.
good at, and
Yeah.
use the AI for what it's good at, and then you have it to do the other stuff. Yeah, I mean AI is
Mhm.
actually quite a bit better than me, and I was reasonably decent at generating regex. But it's pretty good at generating regex. Now you have to be good enough to understand it because like once you want to try and debug a regex, if you don't know what's going on, you're going to be stuck.
Yeah.
But the point here is, an LLM is a very, very, very expensive way of doing things that are predictable and programmatic.
Mhm.
So I tend to figure out, okay, like analyzing this code is hard. So hey, I go analyze it. But then extracting a method, extracting some code out of a function is programmatic. Like, tools can do
Mhm.
this and just like, hey, go, just go.
Mhm.
And you can use the AI to do that, right? AI is terrible at making computations, but you can ask the AI what the computation I need to make, and then give it MCP of a calculator and say, now go play. And it'd be really good at that.
So what would be your criteria? Let's say that a team comes to you and they're like, "Hey, we want to deploy all of our QA to production and we want to let it be completely driven by AI." To use an example that I may or may not have tossed your way before.
It, it, this is not a prescribed answer, right? Because if you have some automated tests and they're running, and they go and click on that button ID and expect to see this div to appear over there, and that's already working.
Mhm.
Don't replace that with AI. It's going to be much more expensive and much more fickle.
Right.
But if you got Bubkus, and for some reason it's going to be really hard for you to write any kind of tests in that way, and the IA is the best thing you're going to get, yeah, there are some tools that can do that where you can say, like, you don't have to say go type in your email over here and your password over there and click on this button. You can just say log me in, and the AI can go figure it out. Now, is that going to work
Mhm.
100% of the time? No, it's going to work 99% of the time.
Yeah.
But if you're starting from zero, it would be better to have some tests 99% of the time than no tests.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't go and necessarily right now. Again, if you're listening to this in 10 years, I may be wrong on this. But right
Hmm.
now, it seems like the predictability of this, we have the problem of flaky tests, and AI is not
Hmm.
going to make that necessarily better uh,
Okay.
in that way. So I would probably go solve that problem in more traditional ways, and maybe I'd use the AI to write some of these tests or help me figure out how to get those tests
Mhm.
written faster. That's going to evolve. So that's an answer for, I think, where I'm right now, not necessarily the answer
I
forever.
wonder, I wonder if what we'll start to see is, going back to who was the person from Circle CI, the quote, you want to make it good enough that you can put it in production,
That
but
was
not
Rob.
good enough that you can throw it out.
That was Rob.
What? Okay, Rob. Rob is
He's the
from.
CTO of Circle CI.
Okay, perfect. I wonder if we're going to find a place where AI is really good for that, where you know that there's going to be a significant amount of development, but you have this thing that's kind of slow but very flexible that can just get it done for now.
But that's
Enough
the
to
throw
get
it
it.
away part. It's not the keep it forever part. It's more,
Yeah, but no, but enough to get it out and prove it either as a failure, a success, or a failure. And then if it becomes a success, then you take away all the slow, expensive parts and you replace them with the actual
oh, I see.
good
So
stuff.
you're saying you get it to that point and then you rewrite it. Yeah, I don't know. Um,
You don't like that.
I'm not sure that scales, right? I mean, you can use it as a prototype to prove like product market fit, but it's not something
Right.
you actually put in production. Because if it worked with
Mhm.
any number of users in production, then okay, then that works well enough. Why you're replacing it? Or if it doesn't work well enough, then why do you put it with that many users in production? Like,
Mhm. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. All right. Do you have any other final thoughts on this? I know it is one of your passions.
I'll leave you with a funny thought, which was sometimes the AI gets really, really eager,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes it's like, no, no, don't bother doing that. And sometimes like, wow, that's a nice touch. So I wake up a couple of days and I go to feed the dog, and in the dog bowl there's like three slices of cucumber, and yeah, my daughter, I was like, that's my AI intern. She's like, I'm gonna feed the dog and I'm gonna make it fancy. It's like, did I ask
Right.
the AI to feed the dog? And it's like, well, I'm sure the dog would appreciate to have some cucumber water. Let's add some cucumber slices in there.
Oh my God.
So
That's
I
amazing.
immediately, when I saw the cucumbers, I'm like, that's what the AI did to my code yesterday. It's like, yes, you want cucumber water for the dog. The dog ate the
That's
cucumber, by the
incredible.
way, eventually.
You hate cucumber?
No, the dog ate the cucumber.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, all
It's
right.
funny. My dog loves most kinds of vegetables, but there are some kinds of vegetables that if I try to feed it to her, she'll just be like, bro,
Yeah.
WTF is this crap? So,
That's my
okay.
last dog.
I do. What'd you say?
That was my last dog. Wrap the pill in bacon and he'd like spit out the pill and eat the bacon, and the
Yeah.
vegetables were like not even gonna touch this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. My dog is, boy, she's a personality. All right. So this is the point where I'm going to toot your horn because I know you don't want to, which
I
is
didn't do
that
it.
you actually have a course on this, right? On a lot of this stuff.
I do not have a course on this yet. That's kind of been
Okay.
in the works. What I did kick off a couple days ago is the AI code boundary. So the
Hmm.
idea there is there's a lot of things that we're experimenting with the AI. So let's do this together. So it's going to be a
Okay.
once a week Zoom call or other kind of networking call to be negotiated. Probably
Hmm.
starting about roughly the time that this podcast is dropping. So if you're
Okay.
listening to this podcast, you probably missed the first one, but join for the second one.
All right.
And the idea is we're going to do some of this stuff together and learn together and get all the stuff, all the knowledge sort of pulled in one place. Keep the recordings so we can watch them later and entertain ourselves, and
Yeah.
just get this. coding with AI as our peer programmer to work for us better, faster, sooner.
So is the idea, is this like a free to show up kind of thing? Is this like a paid, you pay for entry? Like
This is free to
what's the
show up for now. I'm not sure if I
okay.
want to go paid or if I may go paid. I don't know yet. If this gets too
Okay.
big, then we might have to switch it around a little bit. But for now, it's just free. Welcome everyone from beginners to experts.
Hmm.
And if anyone wants to be in the, like, what I'm going to do for the first one is I'm going to just drive and pick a project and just do something with it and show people what I have and then take
Hmm.
some feedback
Yeah.
from there. And
Yeah.
hopefully other people will jump in and want to do that with their projects, and they can get others to together with the AI to give feedback to them. So if anyone wants to drive, let me know.
Mhm.
There's links off my website and off my LinkedIn if anyone wants to go and grab it
All right.
from there. And we'll see how it works out. It's an experiment. I concocted it on Friday night and launched it by Saturday morning. So it's in the ideas of run with things quickly and see how it
I
goes.
think it's a very interesting idea with more legs than I think you may realize. So, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Will AI Snap That with Michael and Thanos, he of the Snapdom. We hope that you have a lovely, amazing rest of your week. And with that, we will see you soon. Bye.